Welcome to Beyond Expectations, a podcast where we explore the ideas, people, and innovations shaping the government of tomorrow. No other public recognition exemplifies the best of government service like the Arthur Flemming Award. This podcast highlights recent Flemming Award recipients and the incredible work being done across government today. I am Wagish Bhartia, your host and Chief Growth Officer at REI Systems, a proud sponsor of the Flemming Awards.
Today, I'm joined by Dr. David Goff, Deputy Director for Precision Medicine and Data Science at the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute. Dr. Goff has led a $2.1 billion cardiovascular research portfolio and played a defining role in shaping the nation's research agenda across heart, lung, and blood health. His leadership spans scientific discovery, data science, innovation, and national research initiatives aimed at improving outcomes for diverse populations. Dr. Goff, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So to start off, maybe to set the context for everyone listening, can you please share a little bit about your role and how you personally connect with the mission of advancing heart, lung, and blood health across the country?
Well, thank you. First, I'd really like to say how honored I am to receive the Arthur S. Flemming Award. He was an amazing leader who set a high standard of excellence in public service, and that's a standard toward which I aspire. I also serve currently as the acting director of the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute. And my permanent position, as you mentioned, is Deputy Director for Precision Medicine and Data Science. In my acting role as director, I provide strategic leadership to all aspects of the Institute's mission to provide global leadership for a research, training, and education program to promote the prevention and treatment of heart, lung, blood, and sleep disorders and enhance the health of all individuals so that they can live longer and more fulfilling lives. In my permanent role as deputy director, I focus on developing and harnessing data science methods, including artificial intelligence. It's a big deal these days, to advance precision prevention, detection, and treatment of heart, lung, blood, and sleep disorders. So my personal commitment to the mission of the Institute is rooted in my upbringing in a small town in North Carolina, in which I was guided to contribute back to my community. So I heeded that guidance from my parents and family by pursuing my interest in medical science as a physician and a public health researcher, driven by a vision of healthy people thriving in healthy communities on a healthy planet.
That's great. I think one of the things that we found with the Flemming awardees like yourself is that connection to your upbringing and some of those early days informed the type of leader and type of impact that you had. So the Flemming Awards themselves recognize leaders who elevate public service through both impact and integrity. As you reflect on this amazing recognition, what do you think it signals about the current state of health in this country and how federal health institutions are needed to drive us forward from a health outcomes perspective?
I think now, perhaps more than ever, leadership roles in federal health agencies really require the ability to communicate a positive vision and mission and pursue that mission with integrity and excellent stewardship. So our mission at the National Institutes of Health is to turn discovery into health. So we work to advance that mission through support of rigorous research and research training in partnership with communities and other partners. And community engagement is really critical to our mission. To meet the health needs of the community, you need leaders who can develop trustworthy relationships with communities and other partners. And those partners can include private entities as well as other federal agencies. From our institute, we really can't address heart, lung, blood, and sleep health in isolation. We have to consider the impact on whole person health. And so we need to collaborate across institutes, agencies, healthcare organizations, and communities to improve health.
As you think about NHLBI and where the agency operates from a long-term scientific discovery as well as public health priority dynamic and the intersection of those two things, how do you sustain research investment while also, which is potentially longer term, with the need to provide immediate impact on health challenges?
Yeah, we really need to try to see over the horizon. It's hard to predict the future, but we need to try to see over the horizon and anticipate future challenges and opportunities while staying responsive to current needs and nimble to address emerging needs. So a couple of examples. You may remember the Valley outbreak of lung injury related to vaping that happened 5 or 6 years ago. And then, of course, we all remember the COVID pandemic and disasters like the East Palestine train derailment and Hurricane Helene. These all underscore the importance of integrating rapid response capabilities into strategic planning across NIH and really across all of the federal government. So at NHLBI, we have responsibility for supporting research related to prevention, treatment, and cure of 2 of the top 5 causes of death in the United States and around the world, heart disease and chronic lower respiratory disease. So we have major investments in those areas. We also pay attention to other common and less common conditions across heart, lung, blood, and sleep disorders. And we maintain strategic assets that can pivot when needed to address urgent public health problems. As an example, we support clinical trial networks that conduct different types of trials, and including one that addresses surgical trials, another in emergency medicine trials, and yet a third in medical intensive care unit trials. And these separate networks came together during the COVID pandemic. We were able to pivot those networks in a nimble manner to address the critical research questions posed by the COVID pandemic. We also gained an even greater appreciation of the importance of listening to the research community and the communities we serve to ensure that our vision and our planning is grounded in lived experiences and insights.
As one of the things you talked about at the outset is the evolving and emerging impact of both data analytics, and now AI in terms of providing support and the next frontier of precision medicine. We're now in an era where AI can analyze clinical, genomic, and behavioral data at unprecedented scales. This is going to be a crystal ball question for you. What do you believe personally, and given your expertise and long career in this arena, what do you envision the healthcare system looking like 10 years from now if we get the embrace of AI with all this data right? And then on the flip side, what keeps you up at night if we don't, and we don't really capitalize on this moment in time?
Oh, yeah. Great question. So I'm a bit of a Trekkie. I grew up watching Star Trek and many of the Star Trek spinoffs that occurred over the past several decades. And yeah, we moved from a point in Star Trek where the doctor looked pretty much like the doctor you see now. Although, Dr. Bones McKinney, he had a special device that he could hold over your body and see what was wrong with you. Then we moved into a situation where the doctor was a hologram supported by essentially a computer, the artificial intelligence. And that's one potential vision of the future where, as a step along the path, physicians will be, and other healthcare providers will be supported by artificial intelligence, and we might call it augmented intelligence, so that the human intelligence is augmented by the computer intelligence. That's a really wonderful step forward because it's very difficult for a human being to store all the information we have and recall it when needed. And so augmented intelligence, I think, will be the first step along the path. Will we eventually get to the place where a computer hologram is your doctor and the artificial intelligence is fully running the show? I don't know. It's hard to predict the future, but it's certainly something the science fiction writers think we may have in the future, and they have been right on many occasions in predicting what may come our way. In terms of what keeps me up at night as we go into artificial intelligence and in research as well as in healthcare are a couple of things. We need to be concerned about data security. And in terms of data security, we need to be able to balance data confidentiality, data integrity, and data availability. We could lock the data down completely and it would be highly secure, but then no one would be able to use it. That wouldn't do us any good. Or we could make the data widely available without any security concerns, and then that might put the data in the hands of people who would use it for either flawed purposes or, frankly, evil purposes. So we have to balance data confidentiality that we promise to our research participants, data integrity and quality and availability in order to achieve security. And that's something we're really concerned about with AI, because some of the AI models kind of leak data when they interrogate a new database. They incorporate that data into their large language model, and then that large language model can be interrogated by other people, and the data might actually leak out. So we're really concerned about that. We're also concerned that some of the AI models still have a tendency to hallucinate. You may have read about this in the literature, hallucinations by AI models. That basically means they make stuff up, right? So you ask a question and it doesn't really know the answer, but it doesn't want to say it doesn't know the answer. So it tells you something that is basically made up. And we're seeing that in the medical literature. I was reading a paper just last week that reported that journal editors are seeing an increasing problem of manuscripts submitted to medical journals for publication that include hallucinated references. So the paper was written with the help of an artificial intelligence model, and the model made up references that would support some of the contentions that the authors wanted to make in their paper. Now, this is quite dangerous because it means that the reader, who may not have the time to look up every reference in a paper, will believe this. And in fact, it may be erroneous. So we need to make sure we can minimize the risk of hallucination, and we need to make sure we maximize our ability to share the data in a way that's secure and responsible. And that means we're going to need to train the current generation of scientists and the future emerging generation of scientists in how to use artificial intelligence and other tools, because artificial intelligence is just a tool, how to use that tool in a way that's ethical and responsible from a scientific perspective. So those are the things we focus on here as we think about our new programs for leveraging artificial intelligence to promote heart, lung, blood, and sleep health.
Excellent. No, that makes a lot of sense. I want to double click a little bit on the relevancy of the work that you are shepherding at the agency in terms of the average American citizen who may not fully appreciate the impact of the mission on them. Can you take the potential of AI, and let's take the positive view for now, and say, here's how the American citizen should and hopefully will benefit over the next 3, 5, 10 years from how the aggregation and analytic horsepower that's coming online will produce superior health outcomes for them?
Oh, yeah. So there's a couple of things we're doing right now. We're launching a new program that we're calling AI-enabled precision medicine for heart, lung, blood, and sleep health. And our initial module within that program is focused on a condition called idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. Now, that's a technical term. To break it down, idiopathic means we don't know why it happens. Pulmonary is about the lung, and fibrosis means the lung becomes fibrotic, and the lung should be a flexible, expandable organ. It expands when you breathe in and contracts when you breathe out. And when the lung becomes fibrotic, it gets stiff, so it can't expand well or constrict well. And in addition, when the lung becomes fibrotic, it's hard to take up oxygen from the air and to give off carbon dioxide from the body. And pulmonary fibrosis, the kind that's called idiopathic, it really just means we don't know what the cause is. It's a condition that is rapidly fatal in many cases. And so physicians are left in a position where they see a patient who has this condition. They don't know why they have it. They don't know how to treat it. And all they're left with is to have to tell the patient, you have this condition. We don't know why. And the bad news is you're going to die soon. And that's really devastating to everybody involved, the doctor, the family, the patient. And so we're launching this program to help us really understand, learn why some people develop pulmonary fibrosis so that we can identify druggable targets. So we're going to be generating a lot of data from imaging, like MRI scans of the lung, CT scans of the lung, data from whole genome sequencing, from the proteins and metabolites in the blood, from the gene expression in the blood. And this generates a tremendous amount of data, more data than an individual scientist can analyze in a rational way with tools that were available 5-10 years ago. But with artificial intelligence, we believe and we hope that we'll be able to take that vast amount of data from imaging data and biological molecular data and be able to identify the underlying mechanisms that are leading to fibrosis in the lung. If we can identify those underlying mechanisms, we would hope we can identify druggable targets. Then we can work with the pharmaceutical industry to either repurpose existing drugs that target that mechanism or to develop new drugs that can target that mechanism and give hope to the families and the patients who suffer from pulmonary fibrosis. Now, that's just the first of the conditions we intend to focus on in this new program. We have other areas that we're going to focus on as we move forward, but this one is one we're launching currently that's we've already made available to the public. Now, there's another way in which people could benefit from artificial intelligence, perhaps even a little bit more directly and sooner. Healthcare systems are using artificial intelligence algorithms or models to help identify the kinds of treatments that a particular patient might benefit most from by analyzing individual data for that individual patient, matching it to what we know from a number of different studies about different drugs that might work better in different individuals based on their individual characteristics. So we may start seeing use of artificial intelligence in clinical care over the coming years to help tailor therapies to individuals. What we've been doing, and reasonably successfully over the past several decades, is we treat groups of patients pretty much the same.
Right.
We have a guideline that says if you have high blood pressure, for the most part, you start with drug A, and then if you need another drug, you add drug B, or you may add drug C. And as we go forward, we may find that, well, there are different subgroups of people who have high blood pressure who benefit differently from drug A, B, and C. And artificial intelligence may help us find that as well.
Sure. No, that's a great one. The hyper personalization of medicine that could potentially be unlocked through the ability to aggregate tons and tons of imaging data, genomics data, et cetera, together to make it about me and you, and as opposed to the class of disease itself, I think would be a tremendous impact for each and every one of us. I think it brings us to sort of the next interesting sort of dynamic of what you must deal with day in and day out, is that the NIH is a critical pillar in solving for health progress across the country. But it's not the only element in the chain or in the ecosystem, right? You have, of course, the researchers, the clinicians, you have the policymakers, and then you the communities and the individuals themselves. How do you build a shared sense of commitment and momentum across a diverse set of stakeholders?
Yeah, well, listening is really important. Um, when I was coming along, they said you can learn more by listening than by talking. And so I think demonstrating respect to the partners that you want to work with and listening to them to understand their concerns and what they bring to the table, it's just really important because we need partners at the table to make progress. And partnerships based on this concept of mutual respect, shared responsibility for the program from the very beginning of thinking about what the program is designed to do through execution and then interpretation of the results. And different partners bring different contributions to the table, whether it be community members, physicians in the community, folks in academic health centers, policymakers, other government officials and government agencies. And all of the folks that you want to bring to the table, they need to be respected and heard. And this is a process that can take a lot of time. And sometimes people want to short circuit it. But, when trust has been damaged in the past, then it's going to take longer to develop that kind of trust. And if you try to short circuit it and find a workaround, those alternatives don't really work well. And they can actually make the situation worse in the future when you finally decide that what you're doing isn't working and you need to go back to basics and demonstrate respect and try to build trust. Because if you yourself have damaged trust, then it's really, really difficult to rebuild. We have some examples where we've been successful. I'll pick on two. One is our Cure Sickle initiative. So maybe you've read about this, but we have collaborated with industry and community stakeholders and the sickle cell community as well as communities. And that really energized science and sickle cell disease and led to the development of 2 FDA-approved gene therapies for sickle cell. I think it's quite remarkable that we've been able to actually develop cures for sickle cell disease by partnering with industry, stakeholders, and communities. Another example is the National Institutes of Health's Community Engagement Alliance that we call SEAL. We love our acronyms. And SEAL is a broad consortium of community partnerships that was really forged during the COVID pandemic to deal with recruitment for vaccine trials. But SEAL has pivoted rapidly following the pandemic to efforts to promote community health and prevent chronic disease in alignment with the agenda of the Make America Healthy Again program. So the ability to pivot rapidly from focusing on vaccine trials to focusing on chronic disease prevention and health promotion was really made possible because of the effort that went into developing trustworthy relationships early during the pandemic. If the team hadn't spent the time, and it took time to develop those relationships, to really listen, to understand, then we never would have been able to do what we did during the pandemic and pivot afterwards. And that really shows why building trustworthy relationships sets that stage for developing alignment of the sort you were talking about.
Look, trust and alignment, I think, are the infrastructure that you then build upon. One of the challenges, and I'm curious to get your take, is that any advancement in science and scientific leadership oftentimes requires making decisions in and under situations of uncertainty and incomplete evidence. What principles have you used? Would you recommend those who are listening and watching this podcast use when the path forward isn't clear, but a decision is needed, either in the context of a pandemic or otherwise, where simply not making a decision will not suffice? How do you recommend moving forward?
Yeah, this is quite often the case. And as I mentioned earlier, it's really hard to make predictions about the future. And so you're always operating with some uncertainty about what the future is going to bring, and uncertainty about the results of your efforts. I mean, that's a hallmark of science. We don't know what the answers are, so we do research to try to understand those answers or generate those answers. And then we need to try to repeat that research to make sure the answer we got was reproducible, was robust, was not just a fluke, you might say. But I'll really start maybe with 5 words as I think about this question: vision, mission, flexibility, optimism, and humility. And I think being clear about your vision is critical. So I mentioned earlier, my vision is of a future in which healthy people are thriving in healthy communities on a healthy planet. So that's a vision that I can continue to hold to every day. And it makes it really clear what we're trying to achieve. So the mission then is to execute research, education, and training programs that help us drive toward that vision. And at the NHLBI, that's with a focus on heart, lung, blood, and sleep health. And execution of that mission requires a commitment to community engagement. We talked about that, scientific rigor, integrity, good resource stewardship, and evidence-based decision-making. So you use the best evidence you've got to guide your decisions. You won't always have all the evidence you want. And if you wait for all the evidence you want, you'll never make a decision. So you make evidence-based decision-making, but you move forward. Now, success requires flexibility. That's that 3rd word, flexibility of mind, because rigidity can get you boxed into a path to failure. If you're not able to pivot, then you'll just keep going forward, even, once it's pretty clear you're on a path to failure. And, but optimism is also important. I think you have to be an optimist to believe that such a future vision is possible and achievable through hard work and dedication, probably across multiple generations. But the reality is we're far short of that vision. And that reinforces the value of humility. I've received the baton from previous leaders of my institute in my acting role, and I know at some point I'll pass it on to the next generation of optimists, and I'll be optimistic that they'll continue to lead towards the vision of that healthy future. So I think with those things in mind, you can move forward with confidence that you're keeping your eye on the vision, you're executing the mission with integrity, you're maintaining flexibility to get around obstacles that get in the path. Got to keep that optimistic perspective and also recognize that you're probably not going to get to your vision in your tenure. But if you make progress towards it, then you pass the baton to the next generation.
I want to go back to something we talked about before in terms of now the advent of technologies that could perhaps narrow the gap that exists in terms of that uncertainty. Can you, if you're able to, cite 1 or 2 examples of where either additional data or the ability to analyze said data has unlocked or set us up at a country level to make better decisions when it comes to some of the things that your institute focuses on?
Well, I think there's a number of things that where the Institute has supported science that has helped drive policy that then leads to new scientific questions. So I'll bring up the example of high blood pressure hypertension treatment. This institute has been committed to research on high blood pressure for decades and decades. And over time, as new information was developed, initially the results were that if you had high blood pressure and it was high enough and severe enough, that it led to a need for hospitalization, for heart failure, for what was called malignant hypertension. That treating those people in the hospital with drugs to lower their blood pressure reduced mortality. That was new data. that then drove the question, well, what about people who aren't quite that ill? Should we be treating their blood pressure before they get that ill? And so then research was supported to focus on people whose blood pressure, the systolic number, the upper number, was above 160. And we found that if you treated those people compared to usual care, which at the time was only treatment if it was so severe that you ended up in the hospital, that you could reduce the risk of stroke and heart attack and cardiac death. Well, that evidence was quite welcome and was put into clinical practice guidelines. Then the question came up, well, what if you treated people who are a little bit lower in their blood pressure? Would that be helpful? And maybe you see where this story is going. The next thing we had was a guideline saying, well, you should treat if the blood pressure is above 140. Now, with additional studies, treat if the blood pressure is above 130. So what we do with this is each time we learn more, we ask whether we've maximized or, gotten to the point where there's no further benefit from going further than we've gone. And that's allowed us to really dial in on where people can get that benefit. A similar thing is happening in the area of cholesterol, especially in people who have already developed cardiovascular disease, had a heart attack, or a need for an angioplasty or bypass surgery. Just this past week, additional evidence came out. It was presented at the American College of Cardiology meeting that getting the bad cholesterol levels down below 55 is better than getting those levels down below 70. So research is incremental. And as we learn, we continue to push the envelope in our efforts to try to improve health. And so I think there's many more examples like that show that with continued effort, with incremental improvements in knowledge, we can get incremental improvements in health.
Yeah, no, makes a lot of sense. You had talked about this pursuit, this mission is not on a fixed schedule, and it'll continue as it existed before you, and it will continue after you. One of the really powerful aspects of the Flemming Awards is it celebrates not only achievement, but also legacy. As you reflect on this honor, how do you hope your work and your leadership will shape the next generation of public health and research leaders?
Yeah, I hope that my work will in some way inspire future leaders to pursue public service with integrity and commitment to impact. I mentioned before that I grew up in a small town in North Carolina, and I'm a first-generation college graduate who has really had opportunities beyond my wildest dreams. And I hope if I have the opportunity to continue to talk with young people, that I can help them to define their vision and their mission in life, and encourage them to dream big and work hard and stay positive and humble. I believe public health and medicine and research and practice are rewarding careers. And I would encourage folks to pursue that career if they have the passion for it. But really, whatever an individual's vision is for their own life, whatever their mission might be that they choose to pursue, if it's guided by this ethos of giving back to the community and trying to leave the community a little bit better than you found it, everyone can make a positive impact, and everyone can have an amazing journey. And I hope that people can maybe learn a little bit of that from my experience, which, as I said, has been an amazing journey for me.
Well, that's all the time we have today. Many thanks to Mr. David Goff for sharing his insights, leadership perspective, and vision for the future of medical research. And many thanks to the teams behind the Flemming Awards and the National Academy for Public Administration for continuing to invest in public sector leadership.
Thank you for joining us on Beyond Expectations. This podcast series is sponsored by REI Systems. At REI, we are reimagining government together. Until next time, keep believing in the power of innovation and public service.